You're tuned in to RX Radio.
Although I gotta say, since I saw you in Miami last, like the Instagram presence has been orders of magnitude better.
Yeah, well, having someone take some decent photographs helps. Unlike my still screenshots of videos that I made, which is what I used to do. And Danny would be like, "That looks shit. Why are you posting it?" I'm also semi-blind now, so I'm like, "What are you talking about? It looks okay."
When you say semi-blind now, how recent a development is that?
Well, it's been about 4 years, but I'm also still in denial. I need it for reading, but I'm also starting to get to the point where I'm like, actually, I can't really see that much.
See, you need it for reading, but what do you need reading for? That's the big question. You don't need to read.
Exactly.
Now, when you can fight like you can fight, you don't need to read.
No, exactly. That's the way I look at it. Although I got to the point where I'd blown up all the writing on my phone that big that I was starting to look a little special. Other people would see my phone and be like, "Fuck, how big do you need your writing?" I'm like, "What do you mean? It looks normal."
Does that affect your training at all? Have you noticed a difference with like visual impairment, both in like the actual sparring, fighting side of things, and in like the weight training side?
No, I mean the visual stuff. It really is pretty much just reading. Like it doesn't bother me in anything else.
Could it be the fact that you've just been doing this for so long that you could potentially just do this with your eyes closed and you don't know that it's not affecting you?
I certainly wouldn't say I do it with my eyes closed. That said, I've never had the best or greatest head movement, so getting punched is not really anything to do with eyesight. It's more just down to not moving my head.
How long have you been doing this for? You've been in combat sports. That was what got you into weight training to begin with, right?
Yeah. I mean, very semi-simultaneously. Like, not to bore you with my whole life story because it's quite long, but yeah, I mean, I got into sort of martial arts and boxing at a very young age, but I also got into lifting quite young as well. So, how it all, I guess, came about was back in the day, we used to have old school, I guess, what I'd call like sports centers. And you'd go and there'd be a ton of different sports in different rooms. And I go back to time, like down the bottom was a pool hall and a snooker hall and all this sort of shit, proper old school. So my old man kind of took me and my brother, and I guess it was a bit of a free-for-all for a few months while we decided what sports we liked. We tried karate and judo and shit like that, and I hated all that. I hated all the sort of rigmarole of standing there bowing and all that crap. I didn't really understand it. And I didn't understand, especially karate, hitting nothing, doing all these katas. I'm not into this. Like, I get into fights at school. I need to be hitting shit. But downstairs was an old school gym. So it was a guy pretty well known back in my hometown. He had a gym and it was a bodybuilding gym. He was a bodybuilder, like one of the only bodybuilders in town. So if you kind of saw him, you're like, fuck, this like monster. I was about like 10 or 11. And he had a boxing ring and a bag. And I'd end up finding myself going down there, lifting a bit of weights and punching the bag and doing stuff. And that's kind of how it started. So it was a combination of lifting and kind of boxing. I kind of love both. I always have. And if anything, over the years, never really, I guess, trying to go 100% into either and always using both as a tool kind of it is good and it can be a hindrance at the same time. Because the way I lifted definitely didn't necessarily help as a boxer. I didn't lift like an athlete when I was young. I lifted because I wanted to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger or Sylvester Stallone, but I wanted to fucking fight like Mike Tyson. And, so as I got older, obviously I learned how to lift correctly for the sport and things like that. But it was very simultaneous, kind of the starting of both.
But now would you say, like, just based off of getting to know you over the last, 6 years it's been? Maybe 5-6 years since Sydney UP? It's been a while. It seems like now the lifting has taken an adjunct role to the fighting and the combat sports and all that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't do jiu-jitsu or boxing, really to compete anymore. I competed in jiu-jitsu a couple of years ago. It was probably my last competition, and then I had surgery after that, so that kind of slowed things down. Don't want to get broken, and I think there's with owning a gym and having that, me as being, I guess, a gym presence, definitely trying to make sure that I can maintain as much muscle mass and some sort of gym presence. It's hard with social media, there's guys like you all over social media, them jacked out guys, right, showing their stuff. And what I don't want to be is that kind of skinny small guy going, hey, you should lift like this. Like there's still got to be, I'm still a big believer that there's got to be an element of either been there, done it, or make sure that you're still showing that to some level you take your lifting seriously, and you take, for me more so, I guess, maintaining and not losing muscle. I mean, I'm 48 years old now. I'm not about to be stepping on some Mr. Olympia stage, right? But I want to be able to train. I want to be able to hit certain lifts that I can say, look, I can still lift that I used to lift 10 years ago or whatever. Maybe not trying to lift more. So I think mixing it in with the gym and me being a gym owner, I feel I need to keep some sort of physical presence with my social media stuff and the gym-based stuff over necessarily posting about jiu-jitsu and boxing, which I still love. I still do jiu-jitsu twice a week. I still box twice a week. But yeah, posting about that sort of stuff is not really, I guess, a priority that I feel is probably going to help, the connection between me and Hybrid, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, because you have an interesting intersection of backgrounds and experience, and it's really starting to resemble in the market on the whole, like the mixture between weight training and mixed martial arts and fighting, like combat sports. You've seen the rise of combat sports before it was cool. Like you were doing it before it was what it currently is. And to be all in with, you have a gym in Hong Kong, you have a gym in LA that are symbiotic mixes of both the combat sports and weight training. Right? You can almost look at them like, and I don't want to bastardize this, but it looks like it would be like a strength and conditioning facility, and it's not that in its entirety, but it looks like it could operate as a strength and conditioning facility for mixed martial artists and combat sport. Is that a reach? Or that, I feel like based off what I've seen, that's a...
No, I mean, absolutely. I mean, for me personally, that would kind of, I guess, be the dream, to have a facility that's actually aimed more at athletes. But as you kind of know, building that facility and having it make money purely off athletes is difficult from day one. Hence, we're more personal training for Gem Pop. Even, the introduction to the MMA and the boxing stuff is generally, trading up Gem Pop. In Hong Kong, we now have a few guys that fight. They've come up through with us. We've been going 4 years, maybe nearly 5 now. So, we've got some high-level MMA coaches and guys are kind of fighting out there. The boxing side in LA, we'll see how that kind of builds up. I'd probably take a separate route to a separate boxing gym at some point if I could get people fighting. But yeah, initially it was kind of like, to just start with an S&C facility and a fight facility from kind of nothing, and obviously in different countries would have been a very difficult ask, I think, from day one. But I think as we kind of grow this thing, where I want to go next would be something a little bit more like that, and especially once I've got a company that can hopefully support the growth of something, so you're not stressing daily about, look, I've got this great facility for fighters, but I've got no fighters and we're making no money. Once you've got a business that can support the next project, so that you're not desperate, after X amount of months, whereby if it's not making a fortune, you've got a business supporting it, so you can take time to grow that. Because I think getting a reputation with high-level athletes takes a lot longer than dragging Gem Pop in to lose weight, right? I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's definitely, if I want to get something up and running and make money fast, that's a lot easier than all the networking and connection and building and growing a team, especially on the fight side of things, because your money maker is still going to be a lot of beginners. So there'll be a lot of people that are coming in new to the sport, and it's going to take a little bit of time to grow them to a point where they're even in a position to start fighting. Then hopefully those guys start fighting. If people realize you've got a good culture, you're starting to develop some good fighters. This is how it normally goes in my experience of working the gyms back in the day. You'll then start to attract potentially other higher level fighters that want to come and train with you and build it from there. But it takes time, unless you've already got 2 or 3 high-level fighters in your ranks, training them elsewhere or whatever, and you can bring them to a new facility. You've really got to grow it from the ground up, and that can take a few years. That's not like it's not a 6 month to a year sort of build up like a Gem Pop type gym is. It can take a lot longer.
Well, it seems like as popular as fighting has become, mixed martial arts, combat sports, boxing, as a means of exercise and then has, this ascension rank to, what's probably the largest sports organization of the world right now is UFC.
Yeah.
It seems equally as enticing and flooded a market as coaches that want to train people for this type of endeavor. So it's like we kind of have this influx, and just like the influx of general population, like it's probably going to take 1,000, 10,000, 20, 50,000 people coming through the door before you have a talent that can start to ascend to some sort of rank. And I would argue that from a coaching perspective, those relative percentages probably reign true. Like, what difficulties have you had from a gym owner's perspective that owns a facility that has this strength and conditioning element to it, that is in preparation or in synergy with combat sports? What are some paradigms that you're seeing with like coaches that are in your facility or coming into your facility, applying to work at a facility, or just in like the broader marketplace of this very new, I mean, strength conditioning is very new relative to sport itself. Like, it wasn't like Hercules was running 40s and doing bench presses, right? Like, they're just kind of doing it, and then they just kept doing it. That was strength and conditioning. What are the trends in the combat sport world that you're seeing on the strength and conditioning side that you're like, okay, I've been doing this for a while. I've probably done as much of both of these as anyone has. I don't know if this is really the move that we should be going for.
I think there's two sides. So as with everything in the fitness industry, and I think, not to jump too much into a rant, on social media and things like that, the sides of it, but there's the side that want to look like they train MMA fighters or they train fighters, and there's the social media side of creating, this is how an MMA guy should train, or train like an MMA guy. And there's a ton of people love this shit, right? They don't really want to be a fighter. So you can hit the market of like, my clients are not necessarily fighters, but I'm going to train them like fighters, the weekend warrior type person. And there's a massive market for that. And they put together workouts that have you feeling like you're training like a professional fighter. You're actually not, but it looks like that. They're creating exercises, and this, pet peeve, and I'm sure you've trained a lot of athletes, I'm sure it's the same, trying to create exercise and movements that are going to mimic what you're going to do in the sport. Well, it's very hard to put a dumbbell in a fucking armbar or whatever. It's like, just stop making stuff up to kind of look like that's how a fighter might train, versus how it really is, which is not as exciting. How you're really training an athlete behind closed doors is not quite as exciting as you can make it look on social media. So I think there's that group of coaches who are literally just, using that as a tool and a different training tool to attract clients that want to train that way, versus you kind of, my entry to this was very much training fighters for free. When I first got into training fighters, I'm going back easily 10, 12 years ago. And I kind of started by getting into MMA after I did boxing. So I found an MMA gym. I trained. I started learning jiu-jitsu. I had decent striking because of the boxing background, and that's how I got more involved in the gym. So my old coach, Carl, got me more involved, gave me a couple of the beginner striking classes, got me coaching the striking side of MMA. And obviously I had the S&C background, and I bought a ton of equipment for the gym. I said, look, I'll train the guys. I went out and I spent, wasn't a lot, fucking, I didn't have any money back then, like, I don't know, a couple of grand maybe max. On a rack, I got some kettlebells, I got a barbell, kept it super simple. And I just said, look, if I can train the fighters out of here, I'll just train them. I don't want any money, I'm not interested. I just want to learn, and the best way for me to learn is to train fighters. And I've got enough skills, or I felt I had enough skills at least, to have those guys be, I guess, I shouldn't use the term guinea pigs because that's not really the right way to look at it. But, that's how I gained my experience, by doing and by learning what I thought was best practices. Watching the guys in the gym train, like, especially MMA guys, train obscene hours of like striking, jiu-jitsu, on the mat maybe twice a day, training the sport. And then you're like, how the fuck do we put the strength and conditioning into this? You know, me being old, like thinking, fucking hell, you know, you should be training 3-4 times a week, 5 times. I'm like, well, they ain't got time for that. So I very quickly found, you know, I found 2 times a week strength training for these guys, pretty much optimal, along with conditioning, and then trying to slot in the conditioning, and then trying to work out, you know, where is the best time in the week for them to lift. Sparring would be a Friday, so we want to avoid that. So my entry point was, go and put yourself in the environment. Nowadays, I do feel people want the environment to come to them, right? So if you want to be a high-level coach, you're probably going to have to go into facilities. And look, MMA gyms have evolved. Don't get me wrong, a lot of MMA gyms have got, you know, ex-fighters that run them. They've got a bit more money and a bit more to maybe pay someone to do this. But again, it's still, whilst it's massively now in the kind of mainstream, a lot of gyms are still pretty old school. They're probably not making a great deal of money, and no one's going to bring you in unless they've got a ton of high level fighters. And at that point, you should have a massive reputation as an S&C coach anyway. So if you want to get into this field, you're probably going to have to go and do a load of legwork. Is how I still see it, you know. Once you've got a bit of a reputation and you've trained fighters and people kind of know who you are, maybe you can go off, build a facility and have people come to you. But I still believe that really, if you want to be taken seriously, go out to Vegas, offer your services in some of the big MMA gyms, go wherever the scene's, you know, high. And if you can afford to be, I don't care how old you are, if you can afford to be an intern, like I'd do it now if I needed to. You know, if I was to take a break, 3-6 months break, I'd be like, I'm off and I want to go and fucking learn from these people. And I'm not asked about being paid. I just want to be in the environment, do a little bit more, learn some more knowledge, network. You know, and I still think like that. I'm nearly 50 years old and I still think like that. And I think that part's probably missing. I think people do their courses and then they want to go, I want to train fighters or any athlete and hope that these athletes are going to come to them. It's probably not going to happen unless you just happen to be connected with, you know, it always happens. A friend of a friend knows a high-level fighter. You're a personal trainer. You start training. The next thing, it's all, you know, stick a few things on social media. So there's always that bit of luck, I would say. Maybe not luck, but I think if that's one in a, I don't know, one in a million, something. But if you really want to go and make it happen, go and put yourself in the environment. And then when people come to me for jobs and I can see they've been and done that, I'm kind of like, okay, this guy's for real. I've seen where he's worked. I've seen the kind of guy he's worked with. I've seen that this guy's, you know, put his time in, and it wasn't about making money, because with athletes, until you get that big one, it's definitely not about making money. I didn't make a penny really. And I felt bad even for some of the higher level fighters. Like, I wouldn't take money out of their purse because I knew they got about, I don't know, even at the top of the game in Cage Warriors, some of those fighters were getting maybe $3,000 a fight. They fight 3 or 4 times a year. It's not a lot of money, maybe a bit more. By the time they took all the bits out, I was just like, look, don't pay me. I'm cool. I'm getting what I need out of this. You know, I'm learning. I'm building a reputation. This is what I want out of this. I don't want a few quid. It does this because I was personal training on the side. I was making money elsewhere, not a lot, but I didn't do it for the money. I never really cared about that. But I was doing it. We were traveling up and down the country, weekend in, weekend out, going to different fights. Because by getting involved in the S&C, by helping with the strike, and I then got involved in, you know, being like a second in the corner. You know, just basically soaking up the whole fucking experience and being involved in a fighter's, you know, whole fight camp was just, you know, having done it a bit myself, we never really had that team thing. That was the thing that MMA changed from boxing, that the team ethic of everything was a big change.
Well, I feel like it's something where strength and conditioning on the whole is becoming much more valuable, but I feel like there's not enough in the talent pool to really supply the demand of it now. Because I remember watching UFC when I was a kid,
yeah,
and it was like Chuck Liddell, BJ Penn,
yeah.
Who else would have fought the early GSP days? And other than George St. Pierre, like Liddell looked like you just dragged him out of a fucking saloon somewhere.
Yeah.
And BJ Penn was kind of like had like a little bit of a muffin top. And I was like, okay, like clearly strength conditioning has not reached its way to the sport yet. But now it's like everyone's got a guy. LeBron's got a guy, like a team, like you said, right? And George St. Pierre is probably, I would say from an outsider's perspective, one of the ones that really popularized it, because he always came in crazy shape, shredded, 8-pack with veins in it. Yeah. But now it's like, if you're a fighter, it almost feels like it's an accessory that you have to have. And I really don't feel that there almost like hasn't been, I don't want to say enough time, but for basketball, for example, for baseball, for ice hockey, these sports have been around for almost 100 years at the professional level. Yeah. So it's easy for someone, I grew up in, the early 2000s, I was born 1990, but the early 2000s, I know the strength coach for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Matt Nickel. Yeah. He's been in that chair before, but there wasn't a strength coach in the 2000s for these top level guys, or if there was, you didn't hear about it. The UFC didn't have, the Performance Institute. Bo Sandoval wasn't in Vegas. So I feel like fighters are kind of almost scrambling, and it's not their job to know what's good and what's not, right? So no. I feel like they're kind of looking around being like, okay, I guess like my girlfriend's little brother's best friend that he trains with has his PT cert. I guess that'll do. Like, what is it? Because you have a difficult job, because owning a business is, Jesus. If you're listening and you don't own a business, you have, Elon Musk had this quote, and I don't know if it's his, but he said it before, and I really resonated with. He says, owning your own business is like chewing glass and staring into the abyss. How is it outside of like looking for internship hours or something like that? What are kind of like the red flags, or what do you look for when you're hiring for one of these positions where it's like, you've established this culture, you've established this brand, you have good fighters, you got a coach coming in. What is it? What's the X factor?
I mean, for my business, it's a little different, because I've got different, tiers and levels, I guess, of trainers, and a lot of coaching, I guess, Gen Pop as well. And, I think eventually building, if you have the talent, you're building your own in-house education system to grow people from the ground up, to do things, essentially your way, using your experience to kind of fast track them towards what you want them to do. I think in any endeavor, that's the way forward for a business, over trying to hire people with the skills, because sometimes, they come in and, every now and again that they're amazing. They'll come in and they work, but every now and again they also come in and want to do things their way. And I think, going back to what you were talking about previously, even to like the talent pool that's out there, like you say, something like the UFC has grown so quickly that, and again, this is where S&C is difficult. How do you assess your S&C coach as an athlete anyway, right? A lot of it comes down to, word of mouth, and you maybe get referred a coach because I'm a fighter, I've got this coach. He seems to be working great for me. I'm on a 6-5 win streak, so it must be working, right? Not necessarily. So you refer this other guy, and he gets the guy, and before you know it, this guy's got maybe 4 or 5 fighters. Maybe some of the stuff you watch them do, I'm kind of thinking, I don't know if that's that good, but the fighter's really good. Or you manage to get a high-level guy. Is it the S&C, or is the fighter just that fucking good? Could he just, run around a playground and be fit, right? And that's not to belittle those guys at all. Look, but at the same time, I think how we even assess, and this has probably got to be the same in a lot of sports, how we assess a high-level strength coach, I don't know, and especially more so in the fight world. There's so much of it who you know. But I saw it back in the day, even with, I used to work with a ton of friends that did all their internships with rugby clubs. And they'd get turned down for, an S&C job at a rugby team because an ex-player decided to retire and went, I want that job, right? And you're like, why are we doing all these qualifications, doing all these courses when you go, yeah, but this guy knows the sport. Like, yeah, because he fucking played. It doesn't mean to say he's going to get your team super, conditioned and strong. So I think there's sometimes an element of that. And I think the industry as a whole doesn't really have a standard, and you're, for good or bad, you're held to the results of your athlete. If your athlete's on a 10-5 win streak, who am I to question whether the S&C, coach is doing a good or a bad job? But then if you break it down, it's like, well, yeah, but the guy knocked everyone out in the first 30 seconds. So I don't know. I don't know how you assess it. So when I'm, again, for me, I'm just trying to, I guess, if it comes to red flags, I'm just assessing, I guess, generally on feel. Look at resume, sit down, talk to them, get a feel. Are they on my same wavelength? What history have they got in the sport? Who have they trained? What are their go-tos when it comes to, exercise selection, just the basics, really. How are they looking at training an athlete? And does that kind of gel with how I see it? And that doesn't mean to say that I'm right on everything, but if you're going to come and work for me, unless I'm hiring you to do something different and maybe teach me some new things, I don't know, I'm kind of hiring you to hopefully be in line with what my business is trying to, I guess, promote as a way to train and exercise. So I need to see if that kind of fits. And it doesn't have to be exact. Sometimes people come to me with skills. I'm like, fuck, that could be useful. Maybe we can use that. It's not something I've ever used, but let's see how that skill or that tool works with some of our clients. And that's more of a, I wouldn't say risk, but I'll just take a punt on those things if they come across well.
Mixed martial arts does seem to be the sport that has the most egregious offenses of crossing that line of training to like the sport itself.
Yeah.
I've never seen anyone try to dunk a med ball before. Basketball kind of clearly understands separation of church and state. The gym is a completely different field of competence than the court. Yeah. But I can't personally explain it. Maybe it's just because strength conditioning in mixed martial arts or combat sports is still so much in its infancy because the sport themselves are still so much in their infancy. Or maybe that the sports are so dynamic and multifaceted, right? Like if it's a completely different fight, it's a completely different sport if it goes 5 rounds than if it goes 30 seconds, right? So and the combination of the two, because it probably is a combination of the two, like the infancy of the sport and the dynamic nature in which your athlete can be considered good in the gym. Like if you have a cardio monster, I would imagine that if I had to rank order adaptations with a fighter, let's stick with mixed martial arts, I'm just going to make sure they have lungs above all else. So like if you don't have lungs, I don't care who you are. Like if you don't win in the first 30 seconds, you're fucked. Yeah. But I don't know what it is, but whenever I see people on social media preparing fighters, this is where the goofy shit comes out. I don't see it with basketball. I don't see it with football as much. Football can still be bad. But the goofy shit really comes out with mixed martial artists. And how much onus do you put on the athlete themselves? Because it's always a tough question, right? Because it's their business at the end of the day. Their body is their business. But, they're not supposed to be exercise science majors. Like, how much do you put on them? Be like, hey, you really got to do your homework. But it's like your homework was, 30 years of integrated personal experience.
I think a lot of that comes down to, like anything, it's education and how can you educate the fighter in front of you. And I guess, look, I've never worked with, I guess, a multi-million-dollar athlete who wants some shit their way, right? I don't know how that dynamic works. You've got like a Conor McGregor, let's say, going, I'm going to pay you to train me, but this is how I want to be trained. And you can either take whatever you're going to get paid and be like, okay, I'll compromise a bit, or I'll just do it your way and be a yes man, which is sometimes when these people to get really high levels, that's what they want. They want someone to go through a workout that they want to do versus younger athletes where you can really, I guess, get into their heads a little bit more and get them to understand what we're trying to do. I mean, for me, it's simple education. Like I kind of explain, what are the demands of the sport, right? We need to be strong in these different planes of movement. We need to be explosive and fast, and we need endurance. And depending on, like you just said, where the athlete comes in, what they present with. So I'll get some fighters that you can tell they're explosive, super fast twitch. We used to do things like, the old school suicide runs and stuff like that. Some people would take off for the first 60 meters or so and then slowly start to die. And then you got the gas, the guys with the big gas tanks that start catching up. So it's, to me, it's not complicated. I'm going to look at the guy with the big gas tank and I'm going to keep making sure that they maintain and have that. I'm going to try and add some speed, explosiveness, and some strength. For the opposite guy, I need to get you, with a little bit more endurance. I need you to pace yourself. But again, the sport, I used to do things, a little bit outside the box where, the sport, demands tactics. So if I've got a super explosive guy, we might work rounds where I'm like, and he's a good wrestler, I'm like, look, you only have 3 explosive takedowns around. So if you smash them in the first couple of minutes, we need to adapt your fucking skills. If you haven't got them down, we need to look at the skills of the fight as well. I can't take you from super fast twitch explosive, you've got maybe 3 takedowns around at best before you're going to gas, to 15 takedown attempts around. I'm not that fucking good. But what I can do is we can mix, can I get you to 5 along with working out some tactics with the way you fight so you don't fucking blow everything in one go. Use it at the right time, if you will. But yeah, I don't know. The goofy shit, I just think, I think sometimes that's people pleasing a little bit. It's people being a bit miseducated and it feeling like this is the way a fighter should train versus how does any other athlete train. And I think also, like, how many people ever come and say, I want to train like an ice hockey player, or I want to train like a 100-meter sprinter. You don't really get that. And like you said, fight world's an anomaly. Everybody wants to be a fucking fighter. If they can't be a fighter, they want to train like one or look like one or whatever. It's just this thing, and I don't know where it kind of came from.
You know what it is? It's because none of those people have ever actually been in a fight. When you've been in a fight, for me, I don't want nothing to do with it. I don't want to go in the gym and then maybe get kicked in the head. I'm not holding pads. Fuck your pads. Hold your own goddamn pads. I've been kicked in the head before. It is the romanticization of your industry. It baffles the fuck out of me.
No, I mean, and I feel it's the only sport that's a bit like that. I really don't see in any other sports. Like you will only train, like other athletes if you are in that sport. Whereas the fight thing is there's a ton of, and again, maybe it's because the fitness-based fight classes are all a big rage. Again, you don't go to a football-based fitness class, right? But you can go to a boxing fitness-based class. So I guess it's how it's always interlinked into the fitness industry, which is surprising because, like you said, because it seems so far behind the times. Fitness training has always been related to fighters, but it's been very old school. Get up, do your running. Don't lift weights, just do body weight stuff. All that kind of stuff back in the day. And some people still believe that. I've had fighters where the first thing they'll say to me, and again, this is where you've got to be careful. I'm sure you've come across this with athletes in the past, right? What kind of things do they need that is more psychological? I've had fighters like, don't take my early morning running away. Because they've got this old school mindset that I'm up before my opponent and get my running. I'm like, you probably don't need to go and run 5 miles every morning because we're doing all this other stuff. But that said, don't be the one that takes it away and then them lose a fight. Because guess what they're going to blame?
Yeah.
You took my running away and I gassed out and got tired. Or it's like, so I think, and I guess you're probably saying with any sports, but in fight sports, it's so psychological. And when you lose a fight, there's definitely an element of, okay, where do I put that blame? And by and large, most people don't necessarily want to blame the skill side. They want to blame something else. So then it's like, I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't fit enough, or I changed this for this fight and I shouldn't have done and it might have had nothing to do with the change, but the correlation, you can't argue with something. If that's in their head and that's the correlation they have, you didn't do a good job.
It's the only sport. It's the only sport where you lose. To me, it's the only sport that you lose. Like, you don't lose. No one loses a basketball game. No one loses a football game. No one loses a hockey game. No one loses at golf. Mixed martial arts, fighting, boxing, MMA, UFC, whatever. It's the only sport that you lose.
Yeah.
Because, like, it's so primal, man. Like, I was just in Africa, like, I don't know, 3 weeks ago.
That looks amazing, by the way.
Wow. But it's like, you realize how ingrained combat is into the life force. Like, I watched two topies. Like, they look like antelopes. I watched two topies just literally run at each other until one of the guy's horns fell off and he walked away. So they're literally, and the thing about the topies is, like, the fate of those animals is they're going to get eaten by something. And even they, knowing that there's a cheetah, a tiger, a lion that's just waiting to just pick one of them off, they still understand winning and losing, even though they're all going to lose. They're all going to get eaten. None of those fucking things die at old age. They die in the teeth of a leopard. And even they, you know, it's like fucking 8 a.m. in the morning, full steam ahead, ramming their skulls into the skull of another male Topi. And you're just like, oh, man, losing in mixed martial arts must suck. Because it's got to be more primal than that. And just as winning might be the only real win. But fuck, like, you know, you want to maintain a delicate balance of the psyche there, because that is so deeply ingrained in fighting, because you're the only one there.
I think it's the one sport where you really are, you know, is you physically against somebody else physically. So there's sometimes there's a personal side to it, but you really do, when you lose, you have to admit that other guy was better than you. Right. Whereas I guess sometimes in a sport, a team, you can lose for many different reasons. Maybe you were the one that fucked up in the last minute and it was your fault that time, but it's still a team sport. Whereas I think the primal side to fighting is very much, that guy's just kicked my ass and I have to live with that. You know, because we all want to be, you not necessarily want to be like, you know, top dog, but at the same time, there's a lot of people out there that, like you said, have never fight. You know, don't fight, but they will fucking argue on social media all the time now. I think there's something like, they would never talk to you like that in person. You know, they want to think that they don't want to admit that they're not probably what they think they are. And, you know, one thing that fighting's always done for me is, you know, I'm fully aware where I sit in the pecking order in life from a physical point of view. You know, I'm nowhere near the fucking best, the strong, I can hold my own. But I go to a gym and get humbled all the fucking time, you know? So I have to walk away going, that guy's better than me. That guy's better than me. And I think that's a good thing. Over the deludedness of, I've never fought, but I'm going to have a conversation about, well, if this guy did this to me, I'd just do this. It's like, would you?
Yeah.
Because I don't think you would. So, you know, I think it's the only area where at least you can, if you're on, you have to be honest with yourself, and that's transferred into every other part of my life. So for me, that's been the good thing: getting humbled, getting my fucking ass kicked, knowing that I can be pretty decent on my day, but also there's fucking hundreds of thousands of people out there that can kick my ass, and I've trained my ass off my whole life. Doesn't mean to say I'm going to win every fight or even any, but. You know, I take that into other things, and I'm kind of like, look, I know I honestly can look at any fucking person and know exactly where I am in the pecking order. And it reminds me of what we were like as kids to a certain degree. You know, the modern world's changed things a little bit. You know, you can use your money as a status, you can use your power, you can use all these other things to be like, I'm above you in life. And like you said, going back to animals, they don't have that shit. They go at it, you know, and then they go, okay. That animal's tougher than that fucking animal, or whatever. You know, school was like that. You kind of knew where you sat in the pecking order. It wasn't. No one gave a fuck who had more money or any of that sort of stuff. It was like, well, who's the hardest person in the school, and where do you rank between the hardest person in the school and the weakest person in the school? Bit primal, but it was honest. You know.
Do you feel like? Do you think that are there fighters that come to mind that you feel like or their camp or their coach really have a finger on the pulse of like the psychological and physiological side of training? Like, are there fighters that you follow regardless of discipline, boxing, UFC, whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I think in MMA there's a few gyms that definitely, you know, stand out as having a solid team across all of it. I mean, I think the sports psychology side is huge. So, you know, and I just think, you know, it's hard to mention names because I don't know, other than, I guess, you know, looking at their records and things. But I know by the gyms that they kind of come from, where you kind of go, okay, they seem to have the finger on the pulse of everything as a team, and that support. But again, it depends, because on your way up, you may not have all that support. So then, how do you navigate that as you're coming up? I think the top level pros nowadays pretty much all have that. Like, anyone in the top 10 is going to have most of the support network. They'll have their S&C coach. They'll have the nutrition coaches. They'll have the psychological coach. They'll have all that. Most of the top teams have all that. Most of the top boxers have that. And then the real battle is the guys, in the middle who are kind of making a bit of money, don't maybe have quite enough to put into every single area, and they're the ones kind of scrapping their way up to be able to afford these things. But I think most of the top 10, whether it be boxers or in MMA, pretty much have all that stuff dialed down now. There's a few that kind of get into the top 10, I think, quick, and then they'll have weight cut issues, and maybe they miss weight a couple of times, and it's like, okay, shit, now I've got to get a nutritionist and dial this in properly. So I think there's still an element I can do this stuff myself until they really reach the upper echelons, like any sport, and you go, look, you need to dial this in. Missing weight, you lose money. Fighters can't afford to lose money. So I think, up there within that top 5, top 10, most of them have their shit dialed in by that point.
Because there's that recent fighter who's sort of come to emergence. He's got the really dumb hair. He's one of yours. He's British. Looks like
yeah.
Well, they go, well, yeah, but he gets like, I saw an interview of him like a week after a fight, and he was like fat.
Oh, he was like 200 pounds, just over 200 pounds. I mean, he's not right now going about the level that he's about to hit the right way. And I think it appears to me with him, unfortunately, that he's going to have to lose, probably get humbled a little bit, and then go, okay, I need to take this shit a little bit more seriously. And not that he doesn't take his training seriously, not that he's not, very high level, but he's not been shown, I guess, the elite level yet. So at the moment in his head, I always make weight. That's how he sees it. It's like, well, yeah, I put all this weight on, but I always make weight, so what's the problem? And I always win. It's like, well, sometimes I think for guys like that, it wouldn't matter how much you take. Even Dana White's come out and said it's a problem. Dana White, head of the UFC, has come out and gone, I love this kid, but it's a problem. We all know this is going to be a problem. Unfortunately, it will probably take him to lose, and maybe once or twice, and go, okay, shit, this rise to the top of the UFC is not as easy as I thought it was going to be, and now I'm going to have to dial some stuff in, And I think that's common, unfortunately. Sometimes when you're doing something that appears to be working, and this is the psychological side, you don't want to change it. Even if someone's sitting there going, look, if you ate a bit better, you might perform better. If you did this, you might say, yeah, but what I'm doing right now works. Conor McGregor changed his whole strength and conditioning setup after he lost and gassed out to Nate Diaz. The whole thing changed. But it took that loss to go, okay, I've got a problem. I need to fix that. So I think, unfortunately, there's still that. If something's working, they're not going to change it. In their mind, if it's working.
But the hard part is everyone, by just the nature of large numbers, everyone that's at the top is by definition an anomaly.
Yeah.
Right? Like it is if you are the best at something, you are the anomaly, because the normal is mediocre. That's how we define it. So it is a difficult conversation to broach. And that's why I honestly think you, and I've said this since the day I met you, that you're probably one of the most intimidating looking people I've ever seen. Just because you got the bicep vein, it's like, okay, this guy's definitely been in fights. You got a neck tattoo, but you're also old enough to know that like the neck tattoo was in a time when people who were tough got neck tattoos. Not now, like me, where people are a bunch of pussies that have neck tattoos. And it's just, that's where I think some of that where I think buy-in is so important, and where I think mixed martial arts, because I think the supply and demand is off, is there's not enough good coaches to really supply, because it takes one strength and conditioning coach to supply 96 players in an NFL roster.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But if there's 96 fighters, it takes 96 coaches. Right. So it is really kind of an odd vetting process, because the good ones are good not because of what they do, but in spite of what they do in the gym, which I think is a really good understanding for like the general population to get behind, because I think too early in the UFC, mixed martial arts, the rising before they sold to Fox and all that, people looked at it like a brutal sport. Not that it's not brutal, but I think when you watch people train and you go, oh, like they're actually kind of weak. Like the majority of fighters by your standards are weak, right? Then you realize, oh, well, how is it that they're able to kick someone's ass? Like, oh, this is actually a really technical game. Like, this is not the brute force game, because it can't be. How can a guy who benches 155 pounds be exhibiting brute force as he beats the shit out of someone else? It's like, well, the beating the shit out of someone else really has nothing to do with your strength and all to do with your skill.
I mean, I've come across that my whole fucking career, right? I train fighters. I'm always, pretty much any gym I fight or train out of, I'm the strongest in the gym on the weights. And then we'll get off the weight area, we get on the mat or something, and some guy's kind of like, using his skill. I'm like, this fucking guy feels twice as strong as me down here. I know he isn't, but his technique and what he's doing makes it. So again, the S&C side is always like every sport to enhance that. But yeah, I mean, the minute I started getting fighters in the weight room, and we'd start to assess, like, let's take a look at, your squat or your bench or just basic lifts, it was generally terrible. And also, a lot of them fucking hate lifting weights. Like, most of them do not enjoy the S&C side, especially the weights. They like the conditioning a bit more. And I think that's where some of the goofy shit comes from, because they tend to like fucking running up and down and getting gassed and feeling like they're working super hard. Slowing them down and having them lift weights, they tend not to enjoy so much, or at least in my experience of some of them. I mean, I follow a lot of fighters on social media, and there's only a handful that really love posting all their conditioning stuff. Like Michael Chandler would be one. I mean, he's a machine. He's only small, but you look at all the training he posts. Some of it's crazy, and again, just looks good for Instagram. But he's constantly posting about his training. He's a fitness guy. He loves fucking training. Most fighters don't. Most fighters love fighting. They can't get out the weight room quick enough. If you were like, do you want to spar and punch each other in the face? Or do you want to do a bit of benching? They're like, let's go and punch each other in the face. That's what they want to be doing, right? Whereas most normal human beings be kind of like, let's go and do a bit of benching. I want a bigger chest. So, my thing was always trying to keep them interested long enough in the weight session to actually get the most out of it. Because half the time they're looking away longingly at the fucking mat or the cage, being like, I'd rather be over there. Until you kind of get the buy-in. But again, that was why making sure that the amount they did worked well with the amount of everything else they had to do. But yeah, I don't come across many fighters that love the S&C side. It's a thing they feel they have to do.
Are there metrics that you track? Like, whether it's strength metrics, whether it's biometrics, whether it's like resting heart rate, like I've found in my experience working with a handful of fighters that it is especially coming off of a fight and going into a fight, the amount of stress that goes into it is so much different, probably because the consequences are so high, and what it means to win and what it means to lose is more than just points on a scoreboard. Do you look at any metrics outside of performance to make decisions on exercise, fatigue management, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, and everyone, like you said, you've hit the nail on the head. Fighting's so psychological. Everybody's different, so you really have to try and get to know the fighter that you're training and how things affect them, I guess, mentally, psychologically, and what if anything fatigues them. So there's the general. For me, it was always question. Take a look at the week, look at what they're doing. If they come hobbling over to the weight room after they've just been grappling and I've got a full-on heavy session planned and I'm looking at them and I'm like, how are you feeling today? I'm either going to push the session or I'm going to adjust it a little bit, because my job is to make sure they don't get injured and they don't get broken. So number one metric is always watching how they fucking move. Are they on it today? Or if I push them too hard today, chances are they get injured. You don't want to injure your fighter. Like, if they get injured on the mat training, great, that's someone else's problem. If I injure them, they're like, well, I'm out of a fight and I've just lost my money because I was doing a max deadlift or whatever, which obviously I won't have them doing. But so there's that. I'd look at some of the normal stuff, definitely like resting heart rate first thing in the morning. I'd get them to send me that along with the quality of the sleep if they've got a way of tracking it. Those two things give me a rough idea. I would always have their other training schedule based around mine. So I knew what they'd done that day. Generally, I tried to make sure that the strength days were also on more technical days of training. So, today's more, technique-based drilling. It's not a sparring day or it's not a full-on training day or 2 sessions of training, because otherwise they're just coming to you too tired. Psychologically, that's more, I guess, getting closer to the fight. So then it's kind of watching how a fighter, especially fighters, how they withdraw mentally You know, they can go from being pretty jovial during sessions and a bit of banter to like final 2 weeks, they're not speaking to you. And if anything, if you say the wrong thing, they're going to rip your fucking head off. So working that part out and being like, okay, fuck, this guy's on fight mode now. Let's just get through what we need to get through. So knowing when to taper somebody off from an energy point of view, especially when they're going into the final week and then you've got the weight cut to contend with, is also kind of crucial. So I always had about a 2-week taper off. I'd taper off the week before they started then going into the weight cut. And then once they were kind of on weight cut, it would be mostly just movement based. Keep their mind sharp, they've done the heavy lifting. If they're not fit and conditioned by that point, there's not much else you can do in that final week, because at this point, they're not eating, they're cutting water, they're fucking grumpy as fuck. And they're about to go into a fight, so their brain's switching to fight mode. So if everyone there's a little different. Some people need to be around other people all the time to take their mind off it. Some people go within themselves, they don't want to be around anybody. So, assessing that for me is kind of crucial. But that's more of a get to know your fighter inside out. It's not a coincidence that most coaches, in any sport, but especially fighting, they're very, very close with their fighters, because you have to understand how their mind works in order to get the most out of them.
How much of your ability to look at these real particular subjective and objective data points come from your self-awareness in those points with you and your fighting background?
It massively helps. Like being on the mat all the time, having done it so you know how you react. Again, how I react and how someone else reacts can be very different. I used to get like nervous as fuck. Like I would be like overthinking. I usually the week before it would start, I'd be super cool until it got fucking, game time, week time. And then I'd start overthinking scenarios. I'd be stressed to fuck. I wouldn't sleep very well. It helped cutting weight because I didn't want to fucking eat anything. So that was always easy. And then if anything, my biggest problem was to take my mind off shit. Training was my answer. So I'd cut weight and I'd be running like fuck all the way up to, pretty much water cutting, and I'd lose most of my weight running because it took my mind off shit and it calmed me down a little bit. So I got very nervous until I got in the ring for some reason, and then all of a sudden I'd be like, well, fuck it, I'm here now. It was very weird. It's really hard for me to explain because I don't come across like a nervous guy, but it was very internal nerves and it would fucking stress the fuck out of me. And then, to be honest, once I was kind of in there and it was like, okay, there's no turning back now, I can't get out, I'd kind of calm down. It's weird. Jiu-jitsu was very similar. I'd jump on them. I'd be nervous as fuck all day, sitting around waiting for it to go on. Stand on the mat, and it's like, wow, everything's just calmed all of a sudden. Other people deal with it kind of very differently. And unfortunately, again, this is kind of the masculine fucking side. Fighters very rarely talk about that stuff until they've maybe retired or after. You usually find out more about what was going on with somebody later in life, sometimes when they're willing to let their guard down and go, fuck, you've no fucking idea how I got. And you're like, oh, wow, you didn't. Some people don't show it. So some of it's got to be, I don't want to say guesswork, but it's got to be intuition by the way they behave. You've got to be, I think as a good coach has to be an expert in kind of, behavioral management. What are you seeing in that person that you can, because they're probably not going to tell you. Can you see by the way they withdraw or by the way they actually do the opposite? Sometimes people get very vocal to hide it, start shouting out more and being. So you've got to try and understand psychology. I'm no psychologist, I'm no expert, but I can usually work out what's going on with someone by the way they start to behave and what that is maybe masking and what kind of level of anxiety or nerves that they're building up, especially throughout that last week. And then I can use that to track against some basic metrics, like if all of a sudden their sleep's looking shit, their resting heart rate's increasing, it's like, okay, this is most likely now, it's not going to be down to overtraining because we started tapering, it's more down to anxiety and the build up to the fight, and then what ways can we control that? And that will then usually come down to sports psychology and what works for you. Some fighters will do the highlight reel stuff. That tends to work well for some, so they'll create a video and a highlight of all their best fights, their best wins, and that's the thing they sit, focus on and watch, chill out, forget when it's gone bad, forget when it's got, this is how fucking good you are. and watch yourself perform, knowing that you can. There's loads of sports psychology tricks that you can use, but again, you've got to try them. It's no different than training. Get a psychologist, try things. What works for one doesn't work for another. So,
yeah, if there was a sport where I'd say there's the most amount of value in, I never played football in my life. Never played it down, nothing. But I work with football players all the time.
Yeah,
because it is X's and O's to a certain degree. If you run here, you put your hands out, he puts the ball in those hands, and you're faster than the other guys. Sort it out. Like, not to take the psychology side away, but it is different. Like, fighting is. If you've ever been to a fight, like I've played sports at a decently high level, and I've been at high stakes and overtime, shootouts, whatever. But at no point did I start bleeding out of both nostrils and my eyes ever, right? So like, it is a unique thing where I don't necessarily think, I get this question a lot. Do you have to be in shape to be a good personal trainer? It's like, well, for GPP, probably not. Right, if you know the nuts and bolts of energy balance, total energy expenditure, and working out and technique almost to a certain degree doesn't even matter, and you can do calories in, calories out. You'll get 9. It's a good heuristic, but I don't think there's an instance of organized or supervised exercise where, whether it's GPP training, personal training, whether it's mixed martial arts, strength and conditioning, where the subjective experience, the empathy that comes with someone who has done it means more to the outcome than in fighting. Like, to the point where I won't even talk to fighters anymore. Because like, if a high level fighter is like, hey, no, because you'll reach those pivotal points in the last 2. I don't even know the last 2 weeks was that important. I mean, I know it's important because it's a competition, but like, the thing is, you talk about like some fighters go this way versus that way. Most people who don't fight don't even know that is a potential inflection point of personality to even be mindful of. It's not even on their radar, right?
Yeah.
Only because, and it is something that, I look at the objective scientific principles of resistance training and I superimpose those over sports. And I think one of the things that we really see eye to eye on is trying not to mimic the sport in the gym, like get good at gym things, but knowing, like, going through all that and realizing that what matters is the psychological side. Like, I can empathize on the psychological side in the gym with football players because I'm as strong as most of them, if not stronger than most of them, and that's all they need. And then like, they don't need me to talk to them about, hey man, when I was back in high school, I really made that first down play. They don't give a fuck, right?
Yeah.
So but in fighting, it's like, it is seemingly such a lonesome endeavor that any piece of camaraderie, wisdom, empathy, it goes such a long way.
Yeah, no, I do think so, to a certain degree, more than any other sport. I mean, I don't think you definitely don't have, like any sport, you don't have to be a high level fighter, you don't have to be high level of the sport. And I think sometimes having not made it, but having done it can be very useful because you see the problems quite quickly. I know where I didn't put enough effort in, or where I didn't place enough time, or where my skill levels were, and they just weren't. Like, I'm completely honest with where I was, but at least there's the experience of, I know what this guy's going through. And then it depends on the level. You've got the difference between the amateur going into their first ever fight. They've never done it before. What are you saying to that guy to help them hopefully, stay calm and do what they need to do, versus the guy that's maybe been doing it a long time, but now has got a title fight. This is their chance. And you're like, fuck, it's a good thing, but now there's another level of pressure that wasn't maybe there before. This is your opportunity to win a title. You've been doing this for the last, 10 years. And that pressure's different. How does someone handle that? You never know until the person does it. You could have been training the same fighter for the last 4 or 5 fights, and all of a sudden something changes a little bit because, maybe this next fight is the one that's going to fucking set them up, financially. Maybe it's a title fight, whatever. That changes. The level of what it can do to your life is a huge, is a huge thing psychologically. So it continues to change. I think that's the same for a lot of sports, but some people handle that better than others. And as a coach, you can only really do so much. I think what fighters need is it's but what I've seen in the best coaches and some of the best coaches I've had is just that comfort of this guy, especially with fighting. I don't know what it is, because this guy's in your corner. They're very close to the action. They're very close to what's going on. In a team sport, the coach isn't running up and down with you while you're trying to make plays, right, and be almost being on your shoulder. In a fight, and especially in MMA, the coach, you can hear the coach all the way through the fight. That they're giving you instruction. I've been with some of the best coaches where I've seen fighters in horrendous positions, and I've listened to like I say, my old coach Carl was a fucking genius, and the way he would coach a fighter out of that bad position calmly, and all of a sudden they get up and they get in a better position. You're like, I'm not sure that would have happened without that guy. Don't get me wrong, the fighter's the fighter, but that changed and turned the fight, and that's, I guess, the benefit a really fucking good coach can have. And that's what you need, because if you go in a bad position, you fucking panic to a certain degree. But if I'm lying there in a fucking bad position or whatever, and my coach is calmly, put your right hand here, get your foot there, push yourself here, you start focusing on that more than the bad position. And all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, I'm getting up, I'm getting in a better position. Now I can start to fucking do my thing again, rather than potentially crumble, which can also happen. So even at that point, to me, it's so psychological. But the relationship between I think fight coach and fighter is, I've never seen, I've not done any of the sports to that kind of level, but that connection and that kind of, I guess, friendship, that it really is fucking family. It's so close. The best ones, they are, for me, it's like there was no one closer in their life, not even their own family.
Do you have a top list? Like, when listening to you talk, I can't help but think about like Cus D'Amato and Tyson. Like, it was, yeah. I heard that Cus was into hypnotism, and then took 190-pound 14-year-old Tyson and started going through like hypnosis stuff with him. Whether or not that is true, whether or not it works,
I don't know. Like, I don't know about the hypnosis side, but he had a very hypnotic way about, I guess, taking someone under his wing. And if you ever listen to Tyson talk about their relationship, it was very much like, Cus kind of, being a father figure that Tyson didn't really have. Some aging white guy that, takes in this 14-year-old monster, makes him a beast, but kind of tames him at the same time. Because if you don't tame him, he's not going to train, and he's not going to become what he became. So that relationship, and again, for a lot of fighters, having someone that cares that much is huge. A lot of fighters come from shitty backgrounds. Maybe they've never had someone care about them that much, and again, that creates this bond. And it's a bit different sometimes nowadays. You do see a lot of people, coach hop when things are not going well, especially at the higher level. And maybe some of those fighters have not come through, there's a lot at stake, money and all that sort of stuff, but maybe they've not come through, quite the same hardships as a kid that fighters come through, back in the day, but there's still a lot of that around, so I think that creates a very different dynamic, and, using football as an example, you can still come from a very shitty situation and make it as football. But to be honest, by the time you've gone through the college thing and you've been opened up to that, you're not the poor kid from the streets anymore. You've just done 5 or 6 years of paid college because you've got some talent. And you're in and around other people with money, and you can get big money quite quick just by being drafted. You're already a millionaire getting drafted before you even play. Whereas with fighting, it's not really like that. You've really got to fucking work your way up from nothing. So I think that's the coach dynamic as well. I think there's definitely a father figure that gets created. I used to get, I was telling you about being nervous pre-fighting when I was younger. I'd get way more nervous in the corner watching my fighter. I was always like the second, but I'd train with these guys day in, day out. I knew they could fucking take a punch. I knew they were tough as fuck, but sitting there watching them and not wanting them to lose, I'd be a nervous wreck. I'd come home from fight weekends where I was cornering, and the next day, the Sunday, I'd be fucking wiped out. Mentally, just fucked. And I wasn't even the main voice in the corner. I was just like the second voice in the corner. but you get this connection. And because it's, like you say, it is fighting, it is personal. You're watching someone you train with all the time. I watch them get punched in the gym all the time, but you're watching them getting punched in a real fight, and there's just this slightly different feeling. You have to, I guess, become a little bit thick-skinned for that. But I would sit there, my heart rate would be going. I'd be fucking pumped in the corner, but stressed, and taking a lot of that. They can deal with themselves. I know that they don't need me to be feeling like that in the corner. But that shocked me the first few times I cornered fights. How nervous I got. I was like, fucking, I'm not even the one in there. I'm more nervous being on this side, because whilst you can help and you can coach, there's only so much you can do. Once they're in there on their own. So it's a very interesting, weird dynamic.
Do you have a top list of like fighters? I don't know many people as well versed in strength conditioning and as well as multidisciplinary fighting backgrounds, like across all combat sports. Do you have like a top 3 all-time fighters?
Yeah, but mine, not everyone might know all of these, I guess, because mine, I'm a sucker for the story and the way up, and just their whole lifestyle and background. So one of my favorite fighters of all time is a guy called Johnny Tapia. If you've never watched his documentary, I highly suggest you watch the documentary Tapia and see his life and life story. Like, especially for fighters, and I'm like this with any sport actually. When I can see a fighter that's won multiple world titles or any sport and athlete, and then you hear about the background and how maybe they, like, this is what you said about some of these fighters being an anomaly. I'm not saying this is necessarily a good thing, but some of these people become that good, and when you hear their story and background and how much cocaine and other stuff they were doing during fight prep and all this sort of stuff and drinking and they're still winning world titles, that's when you really know that the elite are elite, and there's something else that's special about them. Because I can't train after a couple of fucking ciders the next day, right? And my head's fucking gone. I can't. I'm like, this is just not happening. I'll do a bit of cardio and just try and sweat a bit out. Some people are winning world championships and, out partying all the time. So he's one. Arturo Gatti, if you know about the Gatti Ward trilogy, probably the greatest fight trilogy of all time. Roberto Duran is another big favorite. Mike Tyson was probably one of the fighters that got me really into boxing. There was a couple before that my dad got me into, like Marvin Hagler was another one. And there's a theme if you look at the style of a lot of these guys. Completely not my style. Like, I was I like to be kind of defensive and counter punch, believe it or not. But I love the go forward fucking, you can hit me with anything, I'm going to keep coming and hit you back with something style. So those were always the guys, that I kind of loved watching. So I have a lot of, as much as I, love MMA as a sport, I'm a boxing kind of historian. So when I can reel boxers off, UFC's not got quite the history yet for me. There's some amazing fighters, and they have very interesting backgrounds. But I wouldn't list off yet a legends list of MMA fighters just yet. Maybe in 10 years' time, when more time's passed, more people are retired, we hear more about some of the stories, you start to go, fuck, these guys we're different levels. So,
what about on the coaching side? Like, what about, like, if you're thinking all-time coaches? I know we mentioned Customato. When you're like on the other side of the bell and you're looking at it from a coaching perspective, whether it's skills, cornermen, strength and conditioning in the fight world, do you have a top list of, like, the reason I like leaving question, and you kind of you preemptively struck it because I left it ambiguous with the fighters, and you told me exactly what you valued in good fighters. It's a good story. But I'm interested to see if we can parse out some similarities in some of the coaches that you might look at and be like, okay, maybe there's a thread here that's common.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different ones. I mean, some I don't even always know the names, but I listen. I like to listen in when they do the corner cam and hear how different coaches approach trying to, either energize or calm their fighter down or give instruction, and how calm a lot of them are. I think Freddie Roach is very good. He's obviously a classic. Like you mentioned, people like Customato, obviously Angelo Dundee, a lot of the older guys. I think I forget the names off the top of my head sometimes when I can't remember some of the guys in MMA. But John Kavanagh, I know very well, who's Conor McGregor's coach. He's outstanding when it comes to just clear, calm communication. You'll listen to him in the corner with any of his fighters, and it's he has this procedure of how he communicates. But no, I don't. In about an hour's time, I could probably text you a big fucking list. But
what about you in between rounds? Because like one that always sticks out in my mind was Teddy Atlas.
Yes, he's a big one. Yeah, I can't believe I forgot him. I love Teddy Atlas.
He did one, and it was in like mic'd up corner cam.
Yeah,
I forget. It was in the UFC, I think.
No, it was boxing. I think it was Michael
Ferguson.
No, he's never cornered in the UFC. There was. I think you're talking about the Michael Moore one when he's like. I think I know which one you're talking about.
The fireman one. That one.
Fireman.
Oh my God! I'll send you this one because
I'm pretty sure I know which, but it would have been boxing. Teddy Atlas, I don't think's ever been in the corner for MMA, but it would have been boxing.
Yeah. Now, for you in the corner, what style do you prefer? Like when you're fighting, or when you were fighting?
I would kind of need calm. I can't take chaos, so I like someone to just give some sort of calm instruction. But again, I think this comes down to that knowing your fighter, what do they need, and the circumstance. So, I remember the Teddy Atlas one where he literally went into somehow got all this in a minute about this is your life on the line. This is like, you have fucking trained your life for this. Go out there. And it was a full-on motivational speech at this point. There was no technique. No, you need to do this, or, he's doing this, so make sure you're always moving to your left. There was no instruction. I think he was going out for the last round or something. I do remember what you're talking about. And maybe that's what you need at that time. There was another one on the UFC just this last weekend, very similar. And I was actually listening to it was Leon Edwards. So when Leon Edwards just won the title against Kamaru Usman, he was losing like 3 rounds to 1, goes out, gets what now is the big famous head kick, and his coach is just, wake up. You need to fucking go now. It was very much like, you are fucking wasting this opportunity. And I'm listening. I'm like, fuck, I don't know if that's helpful because I don't know Leon Edwards.
Right.
Leon Edwards comes out very calm, and I'm thinking, I don't know if that would have been my approach. Next thing, Leon Edwards head kicks, game over. So it worked. Whether that was the tipping point, but it was definitely, you go, okay, that worked for that fighter in that moment. But if you're screaming that shit at the end of round 1, probably not very helpful. You've got 5 rounds to go in MMA. So early on, you want to be getting more, okay, this guy's doing this. You really need to move to the left, or you need to move this. This is what he's doing. You're not seeing this. Or he's open for that left hand if you see it. You want instructional stuff. Maybe last round, you're down X amount of rounds. Now it's like, throw everything at this guy. Otherwise, you're going to lose. So again, it just comes down to, I guess, coaching and fighter mentality. And what your fighter's more likely to respond to. Some people are going to respond to the Teddy Atlas approach. He's like that anyway. He's super emotional, super loud, in your face in general. Versus the quieter, calm. I'm going to feed you instruction. I need you to listen. I need you to be calm. And I need you to go out and execute. But
was that knowing the fighter side, on either side of the ropes, whether as a coach or as a fighter yourself? Was that something that was evident to you at a younger age or earlier in your career? Like, you seem getting to know you, you're very objective. You're very cut and dry. Emotion is not a word that comes to mind when you first meet you. When you get to know you, you're like, okay, yeah, no, he's like, you're laughing more times than you're not. But if you ran across you in an alley and we had to describe you to someone, emotions are not something that exude out of you when people look at you. You're like, that's a tough son of a bitch. But a lot of what you talk about now is like tapping into those emotions, understanding what reward systems people operate from, what motivates people. Were you always intuitively aware of that as you started fighting, or is it something that you, through experience, you learned was important?
I think I was aware of it as a kid, as a young age, even just playing any sport, how I responded to any coach of anything. I played sports since pretty much the minute I could move, whether it was soccer, rugby or whatever. And I did learn how I like to be, I guess, spoken to. And school coaches can be, basically just fucking arseholes. If I fuck up and you tell me and shout across the pitch that I just fucked up, I'm gonna crumble a bit. Like, don't tell me what I already know. Right? I know I fucked up. I used to play goalkeeper in football. I've let the ball go through my fucking legs and into the back of the net. I know that's what just fucking happened. Don't scream and shout at me, because now I'm going to be on fucking edge for the rest of the game. Well, I've just cost us one. What if I go and cost another? So for me, I've always responded better to encouragement and instruction. Don't scream and shout at me. Just tell me what to do. You tell me what to do, I'll try and do it. I'm not saying I can do it, but if you tell me this is what's happening, you need to try and do this a bit better, or try doing this because you're not throwing your jab or you're not doing this. I go out with a clear intention of what to do next.
Is that your default in communicating when other people fuck up? I'm imagining this. I'm working at Hybrid in LA or Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And something is wrong, and I'm new, and you're the boss, and you're in Hong Kong, let's say, and I imagine something flying across the gym, something that's not a projectile being used as a projectile. Like, are you able to transfer that, like, wantingness of, like, how you want to be communicated? Like, I'm like that. Just all right. I got it. Tell me what to do. Okay, done. But in my brain, when someone that I'm working with fucks up, in my head go, hey, what the fuck? But I don't say that anymore, but I used to. Or what's your style of communication on the outward?
It depends. I can be like that. It depends. A lot of it depends on my mood. And as I've got a little older, I have learned, and it's funny because I've been having these conversations with my business partners and Danny, who pretty much runs the day-to-day of the gym. And I'm in there a lot, but I'm learning as I've got older, I probably need to be in there less, because my level of tolerance and patience as a business owner, knowing that this shit is costing me money, versus being a gym manager where I'm running the gym and supporting the team, it's a slight personality shift. So I do find myself snapping a bit more. And I do find myself, sometimes I have to walk away, take a few minutes and work out how I'm going to deal with the situation. Because what I want to do is pick up the heaviest dumbbell and throw it across the fucking room. Like, what the fuck are you doing? But at the same time, I'm quite quick to catch myself. So I have my moments where I can be very emotional and be like, what the fuck's going on? And then I just have to catch myself and be like, okay, calm the fuck down. Let's just take a look at the situation. And, for me, such a big part of what we do is always education. So sometimes I do bring it back round to, okay, what could we have done better there? What could I have done better? Is this guy getting this fucking wrong because we've not really shown him properly? Or is he just fucking stupid? I don't know. But as someone who I guess puts a lot of onus on education within the gym, I do always have to sometimes bring it back to, okay, have we taught this person as well as we could have done? Is that why they're getting this wrong or fucking up or whatever? But no, I can have my moments. I'm calm most of the time, and to be honest, anything that's more confrontational, I can be fucking bubbling like fuck on the inside, but I'm calm on the outside. I've always been a bit like that. I've very rarely have I got into any altercation. Even when my friends have been out, I fucking hate when we're younger, we go out and have a few drinks and friends would get a bit fucking mouthy, being like, well, it's all right, John will sort it out. It's like, no, John fucking won't. Like, I'm pissed. I'm not sorting anything out right now. But my way to calm situations down, and I learned this a little bit. I used to work the doors a lot when I was younger as well. I was way too young to do that. I shouldn't have been doing that shit. But again, I learned how to front stuff, because I wasn't the biggest fucking doorman, and I worked with guys that were huge, and they had the size. I had to just have this fucking calm demeanor. I'd be shitting it on the inside, but I'd be like, suggest you calm down. And they'd be like, okay, I'll see you. And I started to realize that being super fucking calm and having a blank face got me out of more situations than going nose to nose and fucking screaming and shouting and getting the angst up over, we're going to calm this down a bit, otherwise this is not going to end well for you. Yeah. So that doesn't mean say that's how it's feeling on the inside. Heart rate on the inside is going a fucking million mile an hour, but I found that calmed most situations down. So I tend to go with that now.
You got a really scary calm face. That's probably what it is. You got the scare, because it's just like I just imagine.
I know works well for now. I don't know how it's going to work in another 10 years, but it's harder getting older because you're not the fucking young kid on the block anymore. And I train with a lot of young kids, and they're just fucking animals. Mid-20s, 30-year-olds, and I spar with some of these guys still just to fucking see where I am. And technically, I'm pretty good, but fuck me, I remember how I used to be now as a youngster, because nothing hurt. I didn't need to warm up. I could go from 0 to 100 in seconds. Now I'm like, just fucking teeter around for a couple of rounds. Let me get warm. Let me loosen off my elbow. It's painful. So I still love all this shit, but I'm under no illusion, as to where my body is. Look, don't get me wrong. One-off situation on the street with someone who doesn't know what they're doing, it's not a big problem. But when it comes to fighters, it's, at 48, it's another level at, 25.
Yeah, but you also got, there's things that you can do that fighters can't do, man. Like I've seen the evolution of hybrid over the years and moving from Hong Kong to LA and going back and forth and hearing the stories of the business partners and staff and gym models and education. And it's like, you couldn't do that when you were, that's a harder leap for a 22-year-old that can jump right into a full tilt scrap than it is for you to take a few rounds and sort of ease into a fight or a spar. I think that's the thing that I want people to hear is just the breadth and depth of experience of what you've done is pretty crazy. It's been wild to see you've taken fitness as far as anyone can take it. You've taken sport as far as anyone can take it. You've taken business as far as anyone can take it. And you still sit there and be like, well, I don't really know everything. And it's like, yeah, you're kind of close, man. You're kind of close.
I think that we're always learning, right? And it's good I've noticed as I've got older, especially in the fitness industry, I see this sort of 10-year evolution each time. Like almost every 10 years, things change, and the new people on the block kind of come up. And each time I feel they come up, people like yourself come up with a little bit more common sense, a little bit a better way of communicating everything. And I think that's what kind of always keeps me on my toes. I could easily be that guy that's been in the industry since, 19, when I leave school, 95, 90, late 90s, and be like, I fucking know all. I don't need to listen to these guys. But it's like, yeah, but I know what I know, but I've also kind of, I get stuck in my ways, So sometimes I find myself being like, oh, not much has really changed. And other times I listen to guys like yourself and other people that are educated in the industry now and being like, fuck, this stuff's fucking still interesting to me. It's still interesting. I still want to try things and do different things with my own training and with training clients and things like that. So, for me, I just don't think you really ever stop learning. I think that the people I know that kind of get stuck in their own way with this is how it all used to be. And this is how it still is. Look, I can quite easily waffle off. Look, doesn't matter how you do all this other stuff as long as your load's right and your volume's right and, you're hitting some sort of overload, it'll fucking work. But it's only going to work for so long. And where the intricacies come in, from people like yourself and stuff is how we can allow, to keep the fundamentals in place, but continue to actually progress people better over time and not just keep doing the same old shit with clients forever. And understand that I think that the knowledge that I see coming out of trainers that have done your course and a few other people's now is they kind of get a better understanding of longevity, of how to actually train somebody and not just, I know how to train someone for X amount of time. And then after that, it's just rinse and repeat forever, because that doesn't really work. So that's where my interest always lies.
Yeah. You give me hope, because I feel like I'm this close to just being like, you know what? I'm done learning stuff. I think I should this is what I know. And I'm just going to transition into old man yells at cloud. I think that's a really good, but seeing what you've done on the work side, on the business side, on the personal experience side, like to literally still be in the ring metaphorically and literally taking punches is like, okay, I can hold on another year without going completely cynical. John's still out there learning new shit. So maybe you're my canary down the coal mine. For a lot of things.
That next evolution of whatever you do next will sparks your next interest, and it's most likely always going to be within fitness, right? Like the things that I've gone down rabbit holes the last few years has been very much more business, orientated, and learning about stuff that I fucking hate and don't enjoy, but I've all of a sudden become very good at it, and I understand it, and I can now help other people with it, but it's all still within my wheelhouse of fitness. I couldn't teach anybody how to open a coffee shop, but I teach you how to open a gym. And what the best practices are going to be there to get you making money as quickly as possible, and don't make all the fucking stupid mistakes I made, opening it up. So for me, it all still interlinks, and the education part is still always crucial to running a gym like mine, no matter what, because if my coaches are not educated, then, none of it really works. And there's so much shit out there. So, having people like you help massively. People come through my door and they've done your course. I could name a few others. I'm like, right, okay, I at least have a rough idea where this guy is at, and I can work with this person. We can grow this person from here. Where someone walks somewhere else, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know
you're in LA right now,
yeah.
Right this second. Okay,
yeah.
And you got one in Hong Kong.
2 in Hong Kong.
So you got 2 in Hong Kong now.
Yeah. So we split off. We outgrew the original gym from a group training and MMA part. So we now have a group training and MMA only facility. We needed more space for those two things. So it's only literally 2 minutes apart. You've been to Hong Kong, everything's fucking next door to each other. So 2 minutes down the road, we have the MMA and the group training facility, and then the original gym is now personal training only. And then we have LA.
You spend the majority of the year in LA?
Yeah, I haven't been to Hong Kong for a few years, so I've got a good team over there. That, again, in some ways, thanks to COVID, really had to just learn, sink or swim, kind of get running the business. I've got a couple of guys over there, Gabe and Dave, that pretty much run the show. They're fucking awesome. So, that really helps, having 2 people on the ground over there that can pretty much run the show. They don't massively need me. We have calls once a week to make sure everything's where it kind of needs to be. But really, the day-to-day, I can trust it, and that's a great place to be. I want to try and get LA to a similar point, so I don't need to be there. Sounds crazy. I love fucking gyms, and now my whole focus is, I don't want to be there. How do I not be here? But if I get a team that can run LA, I can kind of back out a bit and be like, okay, now what's next? Do I need to live where a gym is? Because if I do, I'll be in it all the fucking time. And I kind of want to slowly do a few of the things, but have gyms bubbling. So we'll see how it all goes. It's just about, educating good people.
And where do people find you online? We know where to find you in real life.
Yes. Instagram at Jon Bond coaching, or at Hybrid Gym LA. Email john@hybridgymgroup.com, I think, if I remember all that rightly.
I think that.
I never give up on the details. I'm like,
yeah.
I forget.
Home address. Well, hey, man, exactly. I appreciate you taking the time. The next one we'll have to do in person. I'm going to be in the States for the majority of the year moving forward. So I'll fly out to LA, or if you guys make a road trip out to Miami, and we'll hopefully see you and Danny again real soon.
Oh, cool. No, we'll definitely do Miami again. I like it out there.